This is the landscape of northern Syria at the very top of the Fertile Crescent. If we look to the north, we see the Mardin Pass. In ancient times, copper came across this pass from Anatolia, modern-day Turkey. Not far to the east lies the Tigris River. The Euphrates is further to the west beyond these fields.
Here, next to the present-day village of Mosan, people lived and buried their dead for millennia. They built a city. It flourished and declined. Now, there is a Tel Mosan, a mound that has been built up over 5,000 years. These slopes are just the shadow of the city that lies below the ground.
We have learned that the city was called Urkesh.
Lions and sherds led us to the site.
The way we work is the story we have to tell. It has taken us a good many years to write the first chapter of the book of Urkesh. And we spend the rest of our lives here, certainly never bringing the story to term. In the meantime, we share with you the story up until now.
Layer upon layer.
Page added to page.
We are, as it were, unwrapping Urkesh. When we first came to Tel Mosan, there was nothing but a hill. No monuments, not even the trace of an ancient building.
You have to imagine coming to this site when there's nothing here to give you a clue. Nothing but a huge vacant meadow with a stone here and there.
Archaeologists work with a skein of numbers, a grid as we call it. It's our safety blanket. And the surveyor is the one that lays it.
You're locating the site in space, on the Earth, maybe is better. So the archaeologist says, Bing, I want, this will be our grid. And every angle has to be 90 degrees. And even if the slope of the Earth is 25 degrees, which is very steep, you still have to lay out a 5-meter trench that's 5 meters in horizontal distance.
In 1990, our 6th season of excavations at Tel Mosan, we laid a step trench that is square below square down the western slope of the mound.
Yeah, these are Barbara's 5-meter squares that help us look at where we are on the surface and help us pinpoint every building with its walls and its doorways, every tablet, ceiling, figurine fragment.
In time, Barbara's numbers, that is her 5-meter squares, revealed a building.
We are excavating a building this year which we have called A1, and it is really much more than a number or a letter to us. It stands for a whole series of numbers, measurements which we take in the ground very faithfully, and these measurements are all in centimeters taken from certain markers which in turn have numbers.
The other afternoon, Georgia and I were putting in all the coordinates of the definitive perimeter of the site and sitting at the computer and just putting numbers in, and Eco came by to something disparaging about numbers or joking, but when that came out on the printer, it was this beautiful perimeter with all those corners perfectly square, and it was beautiful. Numbers are wonderful, and they don't. What George was? Numbers are not. Mathematics is not an opinion. You gotcha.
As it turned out, it was more than a perfect perimeter. It was a real building, and a huge one at that, whose outer limits we haven't seen yet. And most importantly, Inside, there was the answer to the main question we had asked. Could Mozan be ancient Urkesh? Urkesh was not identified with Mozan until we came along. Up until the 30s, the tell was left undisturbed and ignored.
Unless you happen to be a mystery fan and you read Agatha Christie's autobiography, Come Tell Me How You Live, because her husband, Max Malon, was an archaeologist, and they toured northern Syria looking for a site in the 30s, and they stopped at Mozan.
For scholars, at any rate, Urkesh held a certain fascination because it was the seat of Kumarbi, the ancestral god of the Hurrian pantheon.
Yeah, you can think of it like Zeus on Olympus. It's just that Kumarbi was an Urkesh. That's the way the myth goes.
And these myths about Kumarbi were faithfully recorded 1,000 years after the heyday of Urkesh by the Hittites.
Think of Kumarbi and the Hurrians as people, as the Greeks. And then, like the Hittites and the Romans afterwards, followed a great culture, copied it, and preserved it.
The myths are being published as part of a major German-Italian publishing project. And look at the logo for the series. It's a lion holding a tablet under its paws, and it's a lion that exists, really.
Yeah, here it is. It's in the Louvre.
Wow.
They gave us a cast of it. There it is.
That's really wonderful. And the tablet is the one that has the full text. So this is really the same logo as this one, but this contains the myths. And this is a historical text because it tells us of a king who built a temple, and he's the king of Urkesh.
Yeah. His name is Tishatal. And on the tablet, he brags, he's saying, I built this.
We had 2 bronze lions from Tishatal recording the same event. There is also one in the Metropolitan in New York.
Here's its twin. They're brought together 4 millennia later. Really nice.
So we had temples, we had kings, we had myths.
We had lions, another king, in fact, his whole family. Look here. This is a seal of King Tupkish, who has chosen to have a lion reclining at the foot of his throne with the crown prince standing on top of the lion. Another son of the king also chose a lion to be his symbol. Lions are everywhere at Urkesh. We find what appear to be wild feline bones and especially figurines. The lion was an important symbol for this Hurrian dynasty at Urkesh. When we first came to Tel Mozan, we knew about the bronze lions, and we picked up sherds of the same date. Now all the strands are coming together. When Max Mallowan and Agatha Christie came to the site, they didn't have the same clues. So they visited, they looked around, and then they left. They left Urkesh to us.
We found almost 1,000 ceilings, and it was they who led us to the understanding that the site was Urkesh. And I wish I could tell you what it's like. It's the indescribable feeling when you begin to find these ceilings in the ground. It's very difficult because they're the same, they're unbaked clay first of all, and then they're the same color as the rest of the dirt around them, or practically. So they really just sort of pop out at you. And it's the workmen who first find them, because they're digging very carefully and looking for those sorts of things, and they're very skilled. But once you begin finding a few objects, and especially when you begin finding hundreds of ceilings, then you devise a strategy for making sure that you get everything that you can. And so we began sifting so that we lost none of the objects in the soil.
The dark dots you see in this kite photo are black plastic bags. They contain sifted earth, the entire floor accumulation of the room we were digging. What's striking about these impressions is that many of them are really not very much bigger than my thumbnail. Some of them are quite a bit smaller than my thumbnail. There is a bull here and a person. The back of the bull and the head of the bull and the horn of the bull is right here. And then there's a man standing behind him. And the head of the man is right there. In the space of my thumbnail, there is quite a lot of information. The clay closed boxes, baskets, or jars. Then a seal was rolled in the soft surface of the clay, leaving the owner's mark. When the queen's cook came to claim supplies for a meal, the dried mud ceiling would be broken. The pieces were discarded, thrown onto the floor. for us to find thousands of years later. What we have is the seals rolled on clay, and we have the clay, that is, we have the mud. We found several seals this season, but one of them is particularly beautiful, made out of limestone, this beautiful white limestone, and you can see that it has horned animals on it. Designs carved in negative relief. When they're rolled out in the positive. C'è anche un secondo animale inciso qui, con un collo molto lungo.
Se hai notato, le corna sono trattate in modo differente nel primo e nel secondo. Guarda come nell'animale di sinistra sono un tratto unico. Probabilmente dipenderà dall'attrezzo utilizzato.
Le corna a destra non sono fatte con un tratto singolo, vedi? Sono segmentate.
Uno stile essenziale, senza fronzoli.
Le zampe non si toccano al ginocchio, vedi?
È un grande artista che ha eseguito questo sigillo, moderno.
Our ceilings are almost all broken. We almost never have a complete scene. But there are joins which we can put together to make these complete scenes.
Per me questo è Tukkish, è il re. Lo potremmo collegare all'altro sigillo.
Questo è l'unico di tutte le impronte di sigillo trovate finora dove che aspettiamo la testa del re che guarda a sinistra e la sua mano che tiene una tazza. Si inserisce bene qui, vedi?
Sì, poi c'è un'altra cosa. Sulla testa di questo personaggio c'è una corona, la corona del re.
The scene is now complete. It's really a joy to have an artist dealing with the ancient artist's work. Pietro helps us to see.
Short as they are, the inscriptions on seals convey a lot of information, but it's really the tablets that contain written texts in the proper sense of the word, like the stone tablet on the paws of the lion. We have quite a number of these tablets from the excavations, a few that are complete and a lot of fragments. Some are surprising. This is so frustrating, because some of them, we have the written texts that we have excavated over the years, and this year too, and some of them tell us a lot, even if they're very small. But they're so also frustrating, because many of them are big, and look at this one, for instance. Turns out it's a complete half of a tablet, but it has nothing on it. There is nothing written. It's blank. Fortunately, not all tablets are blank. This is a very interesting one that we found in the royal building. It was written by a young student some 42 centuries ago, and he dropped it in 3 pieces. He broke and he dropped it. The 3 pieces are here glued together, 1, 2, and 3. So probably he just dumped it as he was going somewhere. We don't know where the school was, but we know that the student was learning Sumerian. He was practicing to hold the stylus and to write signs. This is like a page from a dictionary, and the full dictionary was found at other sites, like Ebla and another site, Abu Salabih. This is the complete tablet of the dictionary, and this section is the one that was copied by our student. You can recognize the sign, like this sign is the same as this one. He was learning the words for professions. This is a maker of bows. This is a maker of a reed mat. So obviously he was learning both how to write cuneiform and he was learning Sumerian at the same time. There was a school somewhere, we don't know where. One thing, it's certain, it's the very small that has given us our best insight yet, the identification of Urkesh. Ironically, it's when we come to the very large that our problems begin. We know that we have a royal building, but was it a palace, the nerve center of the entire kingdom? We really don't know yet. And all we can do for now is to follow all the clues. Unfortunately, there are many.
Ognuno delle centinaia di migliaia di cocci ritrovati a Urkesh è studiato individualmente. Fra questi cocci ve ne sono molti a forma conica, come questa coppetta. Questa è stata lavorata al tornio e sulla base presenta ancora l'impronta della corda utilizzata dal vasaio per togliere poi la coppetta dal tornio. Le coppette che ho qui formano un unico gruppo. Provengono molto probabilmente dal medesimo pavimento. Ricordo quando scavavo là che già Fanchi l'aveva notato.
Finding the seal impressions, the same kind of seal impressions here that we have found in K7 and K9.
Particularly the conical cup. We have lots of conical cup from this side here.
Alicia's observation suggests that some activity using conical cups happened here, not just once, but many times.
In that doorway, K7.
Maybe like a greeting ceremony,
Yeah.
where people would be presented with a drink as they entered the building and then threw the cups away.
Yeah, so in effect, this strengthens our general idea that this was the main entrance to the palace.
From the very beginning, we've been using computer graphics in the field to draw the footprint of the building. Of course, in the mid-'80s, we weren't able to use the 3D as a tool because the technology didn't permit it.
It is something like this. We can put together the pieces of the puzzle to form a meaningful picture, which we graph on paper. The graphic rendering remains very schematic. It's still somewhat very numeric, if you will, or digital. It's tied into the precision of the numbers, but it also has the cold look of the numbers. This building A1 for us now has come to mean a whole sequence of stones in place, forming a wall, forming a structure which contains certain floor depositions in which there are certain objects that we have found, etc. How much more lively this is when we can actually look physically at a floor plan, as we have drawn it here on the basis of the numbers, when we can look at this floor plan as a bird would from above. And this is what we can literally do with aerial photography. We use a parafoil to carry the camera aloft, which is really a kite, a very simple kite, quite portable, inexpensive, and very practical, as long as there is wind. The question everybody asks is how can we frame the subject of the picture if there is nobody hanging on the kite to look down from. To do this, we simply place two people along two perpendicular axes which correspond to the two axes of the frame on the ground, and they signal to each other, keeping the camera in view. When their two axes match, that's when the camera is triggered. Keep saying north and then okay.
Okay. Yes. North. North. Wait a minute.
Enough west, north now.
North.
Take
Okay,
it.
here.
Take it.
South now.
South.
South.
South. Take it. Did you take it? Take another one.
Wait a minute.
That's the function of aerial photography as we do it with a kite. It's not just aesthetics or lovely images, although certainly there is beauty in it too, but it's primarily for the sake of the everyday record. Awesome thing is that it's expanding. It's both awesome and daunting because we have so much new material besides the building itself.
The later houses are quite small. The nature of the space here on the Tell, the use of the space changed dramatically.
Yeah, you really get the sense of the decadence, you know. First you have a big city and a big building, and then it becomes a village, essentially. It's a very nice transition that we have in front of us.
In this area, we have storage rooms here. There are 2 large jars that we've located, which would seem typical for those used storing food or oils or whatnot. Down here, what we have is a kitchen, sort of a hearth in the middle of it, and this grayish floor surrounding it. What we have below us is the palace, and we're approaching the palace vertically. Some of the walls are used for retaining soil and building that up, in effect, like a terracing. Later occupants at this site built up above the palace, actually using the palace wall, this large wall down here as a retaining wall.
In and of itself, excavations go from top to bottom. It's simple enough, it seems. But look here. These are our recent excavations, which sit on top of the continuation of the royal building, because we have now houses and graves and pits.
Occupation levels obviously nestled down on top of the remains of the royal building.
By this time, the houses had already really become a settlement, and people who were living there had no idea that they were sitting on top of the royal palace that was there a century or so before them.
We found important objects, though, too, in the strata. I found that gold bead over here in A10.
Oh yeah, and there was the stone plaque of Gilgamesh over here.
You're right. In fact, you can look at it here. This is where, in fact, it's not exactly the other square anymore because it's where we dug last year and it was here. Do you remember? It's in this part. And then don't forget the tablet.
This is the floor. And then we have the accumulation here.
Yes.
And on the accumulation, we have a kind of, I call this is a subfloor.
And in the floors, there is the tablet.
And the color is not gray, not like this one, more, with a more kind of ash color. So this is quite clean. And this tablet is like set in the clean, but it's close to the gray layer.
This is a complete tablet for a change, which comes from a slightly higher level. We have seen it, in fact, in the excavations. It's a list of goods, sheep, a certain quantity of copper to a given individual. And one of these shipments is particularly interesting. It's this sign here, which I will translate in a second. Yeah, it's a 1, then the sign, copper, to a certain person, and this thing of copper is this that we have found in the excavation just a few meters away and from a contemporary level. The sign is like a pictograph, and it means dagger, not a spear point precisely. Anyway, a weapon of metal used in ancient Urkesh.
It looks as if the floor of this building will also be end of the 3rd millennium.
This shows us the height of the deposition from the tablet to the floor. You see, these are almost 3 meters.
Yeah, it was right below the surface of the cell, wasn't it?
Yes, it was a surprise.
Quite amazing. The Raju had a daunting task. The tell, the stratigraphy, is higher here than anywhere else on the excavations.
I'm facing west now. And if you look, we are close to the edge of a very deep cut, almost like a precipice. We began excavating here first in '92, when no excavations had been done on this part of the tell. The tell surface was basically at this level and sloping down. And 2 seasons of excavation, '92 and '96, has taken it down close to the floors of the AKA building. One of the primary goals we have is to find the floor deposits of the building within this room. So we want to go down in this square because this is where walls meet, about 3 meters below where I am. I'm in fact standing on top of a wall, a much later wall that comes from somewhere in the second millennium. So the second goal of excavation is really to understand the stratigraphy, the kind of occupation between the third millennium Hurrian building and where we are standing now.
With Raju, we are performing an act of controlled imagination by projecting the walls that we expect to find. Largely, they are an extension of the walls we have already found, or they mirror the situation that we know from the building already excavated. At the end of the season, we met again to consider how to project even further the building plan. What we might have is a wall that continues this way, which would be where we extend it. It looks more and more as though it ought to be this way. So the challenge here, Raju, would be to find really this space. Because if we find this space in the corner, we can project the rest of the building. In another part of the building, we had an intriguing find, a real archaeological puzzle, in fact. Archaeologists must be detectives. We follow every clue. We can't afford not to. The indications are simply that there is a circle that's very compact clay, very clean, and it has a very sharp boundary. It's really a fissure with a lot of loose dirt that goes around all in a circle, and Fanchi, it goes in like a pit. This line is a bit curved, as if it were a pit that goes in. If this feature was not a pit, then what could it be? From the start, we entertained the notion that it might be a column. And still, for it to be structurally viable, I think we have to find bricks. But first we have to find the column. In the end, it became clear that we had indeed a pit filled with fallen brick, not a column.
I cannot believe that. It's hard to believe this is a column.
It still is. It still is hard to believe.
Yeah, the fact is there.
That would have put a different light on our building. Well, we'll see. That's in a couple of weeks. We'll meet you down there.
Yeah, we find it.
Our first allegiance is really to what we see in the ground, and that's what it takes years of training for an archaeologist to learn, to really see what we're looking at. Very early on in our recent excavations, Lara, Giuseppe, and I were digging just below the surface. We had projected a wall below us, so what we were looking for are the signs of it, changes in the soil in terms of color, texture, hardness.
Here in A10, we're trying to define this wall. We're going down a bit, and then we're going to go in and sideways and look and see if we can find a face. On the other side, about, yeah, Lara, it's probably a little farther over. You can see that as we scrape in here, it's very red. That's from the bricks that are below, and out here it's white. There's no red.
And what we're using is a trowel, which is a little fancier than the kind you might use in your garden, but it's well sharpened so we can cut. What we use it for is really to scrape the surface. It's not to move a lot of dirt, but it's really used as an exploratory diagnostic tool. Rashid is using a small pick, which is really our main excavating tool. You can think of the brush as just like 1,000 small picks brushing away on the surface, and they're removing the loose particles from the surface detail.
Conservators are worth their weight in gold. We never would have been able to extract this seal impression in one piece without consolidation.
Our field conservators
use a consolidating agent to keep the object from crumbling.
And then when the object got to me, it was not a fragment. I was able to study the scene as a whole.
And yeah, we do conform to the stereotype. Archaeologists use dental tools. That's really where all the used dental tools of the world end up, in the toolkits of archaeologists.
And it turned out to be the god Shamash. It was a really beautiful seal.
Yeah, and it was a complete piece. It's hard to believe this is controlled digging, but it really is. We've decided from the deposition on either side that it didn't warrant digging with a small pick, and so we're taking it away. These are the remnants of Barbara's 5-meter squares that were limiting and defining our excavation, but now that purpose is really gone, and so we're taking them away. At the southwest end of my sector, there was a wall, actually a negative wall, a wall that had been there in antiquity but then was removed much later. And we'd been following this wall for the better part of last season, but it really kept eluding us and was very difficult to follow, very difficult to understand. So what we did was we stood around and we were thinking aloud, talking about it as we often do, trying to gather all the clues and make joins among them.
We thought there was a wall coming along here. So clearly there was a wall, because we can see the accumulation here that looks just like room accumulation. You know, maybe gently sloping up, and then it stops.
But in that case, what would be the problem in as far as understanding this as a wall? Because it is in line with this stone wall that would have been present before.
The problem is just that it happened so abruptly, because the accumulation is so clear. Whatever took out the wall must have replaced it immediately with something, not just a soft fill.
It's like it could be some sort of water channeling, and it might have an eddy effect in some place that created a bigger pit and washed away. That's a possibility, and that effect, again, like I said, undercut part of the wall and shifted everything. It looks like you have the makings of a wall.
Yeah.
Objects like figurines or features like a hearth help us to understand how the space was used, its function. There may be, for instance, compacted floors.
This white, and depending on how you look at it, somewhat shiny surface is gypsum. And a well-finished gypsum-coated floor is one of the earliest features of the building.
Fine plaster on the walls. Eco had not only plaster, but a drain and a shaft.
It's wonderful, the bricks.
A square in section lined with very beautiful baked bricks, possibly a toilet actually. Ash, signs of domestic life.
You could still see it in section, but when we arrived on it, it was a layer that went all the way across the excavation.
Taken separately, but especially together, any of these features can help us determine what the room was used for.
We had gone down over a meter of accumulation, very clean. The tannoor itself points to what kind of use the room must have had when the building was in use in the early days. There's a flue on the side of that, lower, about 25 centimeters from the surface we are at now, but we still have another 25 centimeters or more to go to come to the first floor, and perhaps we'll see more evidence of a cooking floor.
The central part of the royal building is still elusive.
We started this season having this portion of the wall, and the gray is what was projected. The black is what has been excavated. This red down here and here and here could be the top of the wall, which lines up with the wall down here.
We were expecting some sort of walls surrounding the ceremonial area.
I would like to do this tranche here so we make sure there is no east-west wall.
But haven't found any. A promising clue to understanding the function is a pavement that we found deep in Jamal's area. It sounded hollow.
Right. Yeah, it's very clear.
But it wasn't. It's really just baked bricks on top of a subfloor.
In a way, I often think that archaeologists are like architects. Architects design buildings for a client who wants something. Archaeologists have the building, and they have to find out who the client was and how he lived. Computer 3D animation, in the way in which we do it in the field and the measure in which the excavation progresses, help us to understand better the spaces, the circulation, in other words, the function of the building. Well, you know how there are some simple things in life that give you great pleasure. The little rickety train in Tel Mozan is one of those things that makes me want to clap when you see it run. Boy, if there ever was a little engine that could, this is it.
Let's go this.
Before we leave the subject of creative problem solving, I know you want to know how we triggered the camera while it was up in the air.
Requirement number one of aerial photography is for the camera to be level with the ground, so you don't take wobbly pictures since you're not there to hold the camera in your hands. Remove the protective cover and you just see a can of worms in here. Now these are all electrical wires which take the current to the camera, but the wires are interrupted by these mercury cells. If the camera is not level, the mercury cells do not close the circuit, do not make contact, and therefore the ground unit does not activate the camera. If instead it is level and the mercury cells close the circuit, then the camera is activated. High-tech, low-tech are bedfellows at Mozan. Mud brick disintegrates and melts when exposed. We wrap the walls and then uncover them as need arises. A quilt of burlap. A plastic cover. See, this is a very nice, well-preserved wall. We have an obligation to publish in print, but we also preserve in the ground. In so doing, we rewrap Urkesh. We enshroud it, and we keep a record of how we found it. The continuity of cultural tradition can be stunning. Misak, our potter friend, needed another kiln, so he set out to build one.
Connections come in the off moments, when you're least expecting it. For instance, watch Misak, what he does with the ceramic shirts. There's a use for everything. In fact, there's a reuse for everything.
This is the best kind of ethnoarchaeology. You learn from it far more than just a how-to. You really learn how culture lives. In our own mind, our Urkesh pots now have a far wider setting than the excavations.
We have been very fortunate to have been able to excavate a number of tombs. The tombs give us the repetitive nature of cultural traditions. There is a rich typology of ceramic vessels, and certain types of vessels were deemed appropriate as offerings for the dead. A child was buried in one of the cooking pots of the family, and it is a typical cooking pot. You can see that from the type of burning that you have on the vessel body itself and the type of burning that you have right here on the rim of the vessel. Now, this type of decoration is really not unique to this time period. And what I think is possible is that this potter actually saw vessels that were made at our site hundreds of years earlier. This is a small, tiny, flat-based but collared little jar that is decorated with incised triangles in a time period that's several hundred years earlier. So I think what happened is that the potter, the later potter, saw what was the traditional ceramic years earlier and decided to imitate it in his own way. Obviously not incising it, but rather painting it, but using the same kind of idea of the triangles around the shoulder of the vessel. And so we have a potter who understands that the ancient tradition was there and valid and is imitating it, but imitating it and changing it at the same time to suit his own tastes. The tombs give us a typology of how potters actually were working, the continuity in potting traditions from this site. It is a unique treasure for us.
These objects, grave goods, are eloquent. They bring life and light to a goddess descent into the netherworld.
To the land of no return, to the world below. Ishtar, daughter of the moon, set out to go. The daughter of sin set out to go and went to the world. of darkness, where Urkala dwells, to the house from which there is no exit, on the road from which no one returns, to the house where no light glimmers, where one survives on dust, one eats but clay, where light is gone and darkness reigns, where clothes are feathers, like those birds, where dust forever settles on door and bolt.
In the earliest floors, the very first floors of the royal building, we found hundreds of figurines. And among them are scores of animals. Check out this little guy. He's made of ivory. You know, the first tendency when we see such an artifact is to say, oh, that's a... But in fact, you want to step back from that somewhat. What we're looking for is a guide to enable you to establish what, in fact, you have in your corpus. But it may not be obvious at first what, in fact, we found, because the pieces are so fragmentary. They may lack a head, they may lack a tail, they may lack a foot, or all 4 feet. And in fact, they may lack all of these. So what do you do when faced with such an artifact? Well, what we have tried to do is to establish a typology.
Vorrei disegnare questo ovis. La coda è molto larga, come si trovano anche nella realtà. Allora adesso disegno la parte del corpo che è quella che mi interessa e lascio perdere tutti gli altri particolari perché sto facendo una tipologia, non sto facendo un disegno diagnostico. E mentre la parte posteriore, come vedete, corrisponde. Qui dobbiamo togliere questa parte delle zampe che non ci interessa più, mentre la parte posteriore rimane. E la coda anche. E rimane perché è un particolare diagnostico importante.
A typology is a way of seeing the hidden order in a diverse body of material, a way of seeing consistently details that are repetitive throughout the entire corpus, so that when we find an object, we have some chance of saying what it is. Here at Mazan, we found, by our calculations at any rate, and the measurements say that we have, with some consistency, cattle and sheep and dogs. Carnivores. We found particularly a lot of felines, which is surprising.
It's clear that this is no horse. Look how lean the torso is. Look at that musculature, how it's been scraped and smoothed. This medium is not mixed very well, so it looks nubbly. But in fact, this attitude and the way the side is detailed and the length of the torso tell us that this is a cat.
We found goats. We found horses, several different kinds of horses. They're very well represented.
Here, for instance, is a non-domesticated equid, not a horse, but an animal that was wild in the area and not yet changed by domestication. This wonderful little guy, look at him, isn't he great? You wonder why these figurines don't remain intact. This is a great treasure. His tail is still in one piece, repaired slightly after cleaning, but a beautiful creature. Beautiful in the sense that it's a marvel that they've come down to us. We come to the possibility of the true horse. Certainly the harness tips us off that there may be some, there is a domesticated animal there. That certainly didn't occur naturally, did it?
This typology is a way of determining what the animal is by body type. And that, to our amazement and great satisfaction, has proved possible here at Mosan?
Of course, we use computers on a regular basis. In fact, our project was the first expedition in Syria to bring computers to the field, and now we have them everywhere in the expedition house. All of the data and information we collect gets put into a very integrated and dynamic system. Everything from the numbers of the surveyor to the 3D graphics, from the figurines of Rick to mom seal impressions.
Let me show you my database.
It's good that you can access it frame by frame, because with 2,000, almost 2,000 seal impressions, it would be horrible otherwise.
This is one of the most interesting ones because it's a seal of the queen Oknitum, and she says that in her inscription.
Yeah.
Here, Oknitum, the wife of Tupkish. Oknitum is seated on the left, and she has a small child sitting on her lap, and the crown prince.
Wearing the crown.
Wearing the crown, yes, touching the lap of the king. Now, this is an important statement because it's Oknitum saying that her son will be the child who succeeds to the crown of Tupkish. So she is the wife, the mother. It's a kind of dynastic program. It is her expressing her wishes for the dynasty. And in this case, she shows herself with her daughter.
And she's the only one seated here because she's the only important person. The husband isn't there, right?
Yes, exactly. So again, a scene of power connected with another royal child. We also in this corpus have a seal, or actually two seals, of the royal nurse Zamena.
That's nice.
And Zamena is a good Hurrian name, and she's actually touching the royal child. So a nurse is a very important official because, of course, she is entrusted with the next generation of the dynasty. We also have a seal of the cook of the queen. And in this case, we have a wonderful scene of a woman who is churning.
With the hands different, look at different heights. One is higher than the other.
Exactly.
It's
so
great.
Really
it gives it the motion, yeah.
And also she has a butcher in her seal. And this seal and the one of Zamena both show very clearly the professions and the status in the court of these two women. A much clearer and obvious political agenda than anything that we have for several centuries in this area.
So the political agenda is that she wants her son to succeed, but it's also that there are women around here. We have the queen, the nurse, the cook, the daughter. This seal, for instance, has only women.
Yes, that's right.
Lots of Urkesh women.
Important Urkesh women.
We are closer now to Urkesh than we have ever been, having worked here for over 10 years. Now the city has a name. An early Hurrian myth preserved in a text 1,000 years younger than the city it celebrates tells the story of a young god, Silver, who sets out to look for his father.
Oh, Silver, I will sing to you about Kumarbi, your father. He is father of the city Urkesh. There he lives, and there he rightfully resolves the lawsuits of all the lands. I tell you to fear no one, my son. No one, save for Kumarbi, your father. He lays waste enemy lands. He tames the wild beasts. Him must you fear.
Silver didn't listen to his mother. He went to Urkesh anyway. Well, se non è vero è ben trovato. Even if the story is not true, it still describes to us the landscape of Tel Mozan as we have come to know it.
It wasn't only silver that came to Urkesh. Bronze is plentiful and there are gold objects, and metal smelting was carried on north of us, beyond Mardin. Urkesh is more likely than other cities to be the gateway for this trade.
Kumarbi was the primordial god of the Hurrian pantheon, and Urkesh was his city. But this city must have had political significance as well. The Hurrian word for king, Enden, is known only in connection with this city. The mythical and the historical dimensions meet here at Urkesh. No wonder the Silver set out for Tel Mozan.
Silver set out for Urkesh. He arrived in Urkesh.
Oh, Silver, Kumabi, your father, is not in his house. He is gone.
He has gone to roam the land.
He wanders in the mountains.
He wanders
Here the text breaks off. Whether or not one of our ceilings represents Kumarbi roaming in the mountains, we cannot say, but we are not going to try to follow him there.